Happy New Year, everyone. It's good to be back again. Happy to see another year. 22 was a good year, especially after the COVID and everything. So I'm hoping that 2023 is going to be even a better year. So if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like, and share. I usually talk about geopolitics. And today I'm going to be focusing on Joe Biden trip that he intends to do mid this year to Sub Sahara Africa. The Biden administration had a meeting between African leaders and the USA government in terms of USA. It was called the USA Summit Africa of 2022, and they were discussing various investment opportunities that the US government can take advantage of, the various investment opportunities in Africa. But we, as all know, it's a geopolitical game. The reason why the America is reacting is because there is a fear of influence of Africa in the African continent by China and Russia. It's a big power competition, and where all these countries now, it's a new scramble for Africa. And I'm not trying to be hard on the United States government. I'm just looking at how this geopolitical game is now playing around, is taking a new front, especially in terms of, the African continent is not new to the geopolitical game, where great power competition, they become subjects of great power competitions, the history. So it's a new era, I would say that. And America's, realized that Africa was slipping away from its grip. They called, the Biden administration called a USA Summit Africa. Let's remember the last summit happened in 2014 between Obama and African leaders. And the reason it happened in 2022 is because under the Trump administration, there was no policy for the African continent. The African continent was seen as worthless, no need to engage them. And under the Biden administration, they came to realize that those 5 years of Trump not engaging Africa, China, in fact, and Russia had penetrated very deep into the continent. So I'm going to give my view of why the trip into Sub-Sahara Africa is happening. What does the Biden administration intend to do or to gain? So for those who don't know, the Sub-Sahara Africa is not the Northern Africa. It excludes the northern countries, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Morocco. Now the Chad, the Cameroon, the Sudan, going down all the way to South Africa are the sub-Saharan countries. So I'm assuming he's going to visit 3 to 5 countries in his trip. Very probably going to look at the promising countries. I can say Kenya is on the list, Nigeria or Ghana is on the list also. A country like Senegal I can't rule out, a country like South Africa also can't rule out. I'm assuming he's going to exclude the countries that have been having coups and instability, because if he visits them, he's going to be sending a very wrong message. If he visits such a country, he might be sending the message that his government supports this system of government, these new administrations, and he doesn't want to paint that image. So the countries that I have mentioned, Kenya, he might visit Rwanda. I can't exclude also Rwanda, South Africa. He might visit Nigeria, Senegal is on the list also. I can also put there Botswana, but there's not that much strong tie between Botswana and America. Biden is going to visit with the Vice President Kamala Harris, and the aim is to try and solidify African partnership, African strength. But is it possible, or what do they hope to achieve? Because first of all, when I see this trip, it's going to be a very expensive trip across the African continent. I'm assuming it's going to come with a lot of leaders, a lot of investors. But also, let's remember that the African countries have been having an issue with the American government. And one thing that I see the issue that the American government or administration faces when dealing with Africa is that there is no consistent foreign policy. There is that primary foreign policy, but the secondaries and the others are heavily affected by different governments. And I just gave an example. In 2014, Obama had laid down a forum, to counter China influence in Africa, USA African Summit. When Trump came, a new administration, they scrapped that away. Now they have returned it again. So there is no consistency when it comes to American foreign policy with Africa. But if you look with China or with Russia or with other players, there's always a consistency. Regardless of the government that comes to power, you can clearly see there's always a consistency of. But with Africa, it's it's lukewarm. It's if it's today I'm feeling this, I'll do this. If tomorrow, so this is also a very key thing, because you need to understand that to build relationship with countries, they need to be a consistency of foreign policy interaction, diplomatic interaction, and all those kind of things. So for me, I feel that even when it makes this trip, it will be, it will be like a reset, because Obama did the same trip before his final years. So, and he already had set the foundation, but when Trump came, he dismantled the foundation. So it's starting again. Let's not forget that the Chinese have been doing this game, the African Investment China-Africa Summit, since the year 2000. So the Chinese have very good experience. If you look at the various administrations that have come through the Chinese, the party leaders, the Communist Party leaders that have come, and the presidents, because the party leader of the Communist Party is the president, their foreign policy has been consistent. And now you come to an era, because now Xi Jinping was the first president of China to effectively invest in Africa in terms of bilateral trade, and ensure that Africa becomes a footprint, or it becomes a vassal continent, of China. If you look since 2012, since Xi Jinping came, Chinese African policy has been consistent. And now, because he's even extended the term, I am assuming that it's going to be consistent. And that one thing I need, probably the American administration is failing, because their policy towards Africa is not consistent. If you look at the other great player, which is Russia, you find that Putin has been in the government for so long. So the government policy is consistent. I'm not saying that you have to be in power like Xi Jinping or Putin forever to be consistent, but I'm saying that it's time that America starts putting Africa as a priority. It shouldn't be like the president just comes, if he feels like he wants to travel to Africa, he can travel, because I've just said policies between America and Japan are consistent. Policies between America and Russia are consistent. Policies between America and China are consistent. And you expect that, since there are African descendants in America, black Americans, that in fact the African continent could be focused more on, because some African descendants live there. They could focus a common foreign policy, a permanent foreign policy, like all these other countries that they are dealing with. And these countries that they are dealing with, regardless of the change of government, we always see that South Korea was in good terms with Trump, Japan was in good terms with Trump. They did that with Obama, they did that with Bush, with Biden. So some countries are getting first class treatment. So my fear for this trip is another fear for me is that this trip is a knee-jerk reaction, because of the Chinese and Russian how they've immersed themselves in the African continent. It's a knee-jerk reaction, and things that are done in knee-jerk reaction tend to have over promises and less commitment. And we can look that because now they are saying they are going to fund $55 billion in Africa. They still that other project that they started last year. It's called the Build Back Better World, which the Europeans and the Americans are supposed to fund 1 trillion, and it's supposed to counter the Belt and Road Initiative of the Chinese, which till today we have not. There is no concrete anything that shows that there is that willingness, because I see that things are being done in a knee-jerk reaction moment. Like the Chinese have done this, let's trace and do this. We saw when Lavrov visited Africa, he visited Egypt, Russia is building a nuclear power plant in Egypt. He visited Ethiopia, he visited Uganda, and immediately, even less than 4 days, Blinken also took a plane. In fact, Blinken was in the Philippines. He didn't even go to the US. He passed through Africa. He passed through Rwanda. He passed through South Africa. So Congo. So there is this knee-jerk movement that the America needs to avoid. It needs to learn. Countries like China have been in the game for almost 20-25 years in Africa, and they have been consistent with their foreign policy. So it's very hard to come, even if you come with money. You're not the only player that has money now. Even the Chinese have money. So it will be very hard. You need to follow a different strategy, and that's why I'm very, very concerned about Biden's trip to Africa, because I think it's more of a PR trip, to just show that we still value Africa. America is still a very important strategic partner to the African continent. I can't deny that. I don't think any African can deny that. But at the end of the day, the strategic importance is dwindling, and they need to be very careful that this trip might not be looked as a PR trip, just to get people to clap, to just see Biden is in Africa, he's supporting Africa with no meaningful connotation, just to appease everyone, to appease the Africans, to appease the audience in America, to see that their country is still very influential in Africa. And all these when I look at how these things are being handled, because even if you look at the USA and Africa summit, the interaction between African leaders and the US government was more of boss employee kind of relationship. And I hope that when Biden comes to Africa, he's going to ensure that he puts an equal field, because you must remember that when the Chinese come to Africa, they always treat regardless of the country, as an equal field. And so I hope that that mentality that America has been having of always treating Africa as the second class will not continue. Another thing is that 2019, the Americans passed an act called the Global Fragility Act. The act is meant to counter influence of China and Russia, or other countries in third world countries, and also try to put funds and resources so that they can strengthen institutions, so that these African countries or these third world countries can grow out of poverty and become economically dependent, that they would depend on countries like China, Russia. And it's very interesting, that's why I'm saying that Americans seems to have no permanent foreign policy. I know for sometimes foreign policy are not permanent, they need to be flexible, but they are not they are not in a straight line, because the Global Fragility Act became active in 2019. It's being enforced. It was enforced the last 2 months of last year. It's not even enforced. It was just taken up. So the enforcement hasn't started, because the Global Fragility Act suggests that the United States will set up certain amount of money for 5 years, and it will choose 5 countries based on a criteria that shows that the countries need to be strengthened in terms of the democracy they are willing. So it's another fund to try and strengthen the country's institution, to make them democratic. And we must remember that the reason they were claiming that they chose this kind of system was because the American government was finding it hard to compete with China, because it had now even had to resort because to doing dirty work, like how the Chinese, how they're seeing the so-called Chinese are doing, like bribery. So to ensure that America institutions are not corrupted or don't find them doing dirty work so as to compete with. Because if I'm a government leader and the Chinese are telling me they don't care about how I govern my country, they only care about business, I'd rather work. If I'm an oppressive leader, I'd rather work with the Chinese. But if the Americans come and tell me I need to change my institution, I will not work with them. So there was a risk that America could be forced to adapt the Chinese strategy, where it doesn't care about how people are living or governing, they just want to make business. And so the Global Fragility Act was brought to ensure that America doesn't find itself in that path. And And that's a good initiative, but as I said, that there's this connotation that Africa doesn't matter until it matters, when we are competing with China and Russia. Because how can an act be done in 2019 and it's not even implemented till now? So I think that's something that the Biden administration need to look at, or the US foreign policy or government need to look at and try to analyze. If Biden comes to this trip, what is the main aim of this trip? Because we can talk about business, we can talk about infrastructure, we can talk about resources, but what is the main aim of this trip? There has to be an agenda for the African continent, not for the American business people and the African elite business people. There have to be an agenda for the continent. What are you bringing to the continent? You said Africa is going to be part of the G20. At the US Africa Summit, we want to see Africa at the table at the G20, a member of the G20. You said that Africa, they should be on the permanent Security Council. So we need to see Africa on the Security Council, also having a say, because as Africans, as Africa, we can't have, the Security Council not including everyone of the world, just including a few. It's like an elite club, and then African issues are not considered. So it's better to include everyone, so that even when you deliberate, even if there's an issue in Africa, I think when Africa is in the Security Council, they understand the hardships and the situation that Africans are facing. So it will be better to see how we can engage each other and try and help out. And also Africa can also play a very important role in world peace, and because it has gone through a lot. What's happening in Ukraine and Sri Lanka. I think Africa has gone through a lot, so it can that platform can help Africa promote its agenda. It's in terms of economic opportunities, world peace, because Africa doesn't have a platform where it can project its agenda. That's why it's always seen as as a poor country, as a poor continent, as a bigger continent. So it needs this platform. And if I was I would say Biden, I will try and make sure that also the Senate and all these lawmakers, try and take look at Africa very differently, because even as Biden hosted the USA Africa Summit and is coming to Africa this year, there's already they already passed a law that said that countering Russian malign act in Africa. The bill strictly says that countries in Africa can be sanctioned if they do business with Russia. So how are you going to promote an US African summit where it's growth and development and all those things, and already there's lawmakers are putting a bill that literally can be triggered anytime to sanction African countries if they do business with Russia? Because let's remember, Blinken came to Africa. He did a tour after Lavrov and went to South Africa and clearly stated that American foreign policy is changing. They will not again tell Africans what to do. They will work as partners. They will not control them. They will work as partners. They will. Even the South African foreign minister said that that's the kind of relationship they want. They want to be allowed to interact with anyone, either Russia, either China, without the fear of being told what to do. And Blinken promised, even Biden promised, but then again, there's a bill in parliament that's saying if you talk to this person, we are going to sanction you. That sounds like it's not a legitimate commitment. It's a double standard. It's not, it's like America is not committed to Africa. They are just doing that because, as I said, of a knee-jerk reaction. So also Biden needs to talk to the lawmakers and tell them to get out of this Cold War era mentality of great power competition. They need to understand that Africa also needs to be allowed to make its choice. But anyway, I just hope that whatever Biden intentions are for Africa and the United States government will be positive, and also the African leaders will take this engagement as positive and as an opportunity to work with the American government. There are various opportunities for both continents, the USA and the African continent, and we can work together, and we can promote development. So I hope that this pledges become to fruition and become very important. Anyway, guys, it's always good to engage. Please like, subscribe, and share. And all those who have been engaging me on the comments, I really appreciate it. I remember when I started 2-3 months ago or 4 months ago, I just only had one subscriber. Now I see the subscription is almost 70. Let's get to 100, guys. 100 subscribers. Cheer, guys. Ciao.